Germany and France are exploring radical methods of securing deeper and more rapid fiscal integration among eurozone countries. That quote is taken from Reuters on November 27th. According to the report, Germany's original plan to get all 27 nations to amend the Lisbon Treaty by the end of 2012 may not be possible. As a result, Reuters reported, senior French and German civil servants have been exploring other ways of achieving the goal, either via an agreement among just the Eurozone countries or a separate agreement outside the Euro Treaty that could involve a core of around 8 to 10 Eurozone countries. Now, anyone familiar with Herbert W. Armstrong's ministry knows that the idea of a smaller union within Europe, one with Germany at the top and consisting of 10 nations, is not new. It's actually described in great detail on many pages in your Bible.
The Philadelphia Church of God presents the Trumpet Daily.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Trumpet Daily. Some of our older viewers may remember this old Bible correspondence course produced by Herbert W. Armstrong back in the 1950s and 60s. The copyright on this one is from 1955, and the subject, as you can see, is how Christ will stop world suicide. Now, along with those old correspondence lessons, Mr. Armstrong would sometimes include these pink Facts You Should Know letters. When my father enrolled in the course back in 1961, he received a copy of this letter, which is titled, "A Hot World War III is Coming." Germany was responsible for both world wars, the letter explained, and in 1943, when Germany's top generals, scientists, industrialists, and bankers realized that they were about to lose the Second World War, secret plans for a third round of war began in earnest. The first step in Germany's quest for world dominion was the creation of a United States of Europe, the letter said. The letter goes on and says, "We know how the United States of Europe will be used by Germany to attempt world domination. Prophecy shows 10 kings, 10 dictators will arise in Europe and give their power to Germany." That was the signature prophecy of Herbert W. Armstrong's 50-year ministry. Anyone familiar with his work instantly remembers his many articles and booklets, his radio programs and television shows on Bible prophecy. We'd like to play one of those clips for you right now. I don't have the exact date on this one, but it's from one of Mr. Armstrong's radio programs from the 1960s, so it's about 50 years old.
Well, greetings, friends around the world. Now, I've been telling our radio audience and readers of the Plain Truth that a political union of 10 nations in Europe would rise, resurrecting the Holy Roman Empire of the Middle Ages. I was predicting this even before World War II began. Not many believed it then. Well, let me quote to you what I wrote in an article in the Plain Truth of July 1935, 4 years before World War II was started by Adolf Hitler. I'll just quote a little out of the center of that entire article that shows what the article was saying and what it was talking about. Listen, quote, "Out of the present Italy is to emerge a reincarnation of the once great and powerful Roman Empire by an alliance of 10 nations within its territory." That was 4 years before World War II began. Biblical prophecy revealed that it would start as an economic movement, that it would bring an era of unusual prosperity to Europe. It did start in March 1957, when 6 European countries West Germany, France, Italy, Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg signed the Treaty of Rome, creating what was called the EEC, that is, the European Economic Community. It has been known, of course, as the European Common Market, and it came into being, actual operation, that is, on January the 1st, 1958. Immediately it began to bring economic prosperity to those 6 countries and has provided economic competition for Britain, for the United States, and for other countries around the world. For years, European nations have wanted to unite in a sort of United States of Europe. What they want is political union, but they've never been able to bring that about. While President de Gaulle of France lived, Germany would never have yielded to accept him as the political head of a union, including Germany, and the French would not accept a German. Long-range plans are already underway for a common currency in Europe, but other things are going to intervene in the meantime that I want to tell you about, and I predict that there will be a common currency a great deal sooner in Europe. Now, how did I know, as far back as 1927 even, that this coming United States of Europe would spring up in our time? I knew because it's revealed in biblical prophecy.
Now, as I mentioned, Mr. Armstrong made those comments over the air sometime during the 1960s. And yet, as he said on that broadcast, he knew long before then that a powerful 10-nation union would rise out of Europe in these latter days. He knew in the 1950s that the European Economic Community, as it was called then, was the very beginning stage of the final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. Mr. Armstrong knew there would eventually be a common currency, which there is today. He knew there would be a political union. He knew that East and West Germany would eventually reunite, which they did in 1989, and that a revived German power would dominate a union of European nations, a union of 10 nations or kings, as it says in the Bible. Now today there are 27 nations in the European Union, 17 of which are members of the eurozone. And yet, because of the worldwide financial crisis, which Mr. Armstrong also predicted, by the way, look at what we now see happening in Europe. We see Germany leading the way and radically reshaping the continent. We see Germany making plans to build a core foundation of 8 to 10 nations in Europe. Here again is what Reuters reported on November 27th. Senior French and German civil servants have been exploring other ways of achieving the goal, either via an agreement among just the eurozone countries or a separate agreement outside the EU treaty that could involve a core of around 8 to 10 eurozone countries. Now, you could have read something very similar to that in The Plain Truth, Mr. Armstrong's magazine, back in the 1950s. One EU official told Reuters, "The Germans have made up their minds. They want treaty change, and they are doing everything they can to push for it as rapidly as possible." Prophetic events are now moving along at a lightning-fast pace. It was just a few weeks ago that France publicly acknowledged the possibility of a two-tiered Europe. And now we see France and Germany working overtime to put together a radical new proposal for Europe that may involve 10 nations. A radical new proposal. That's what Reuters said, not me. Reuters said that. Now go and get your Bible and blow the dust off of it and turn to the book of Revelation, chapter 17. Revelation 17 describes the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire, which is forming right now in Europe. It's described in vivid detail, not just in Revelation 17, but many other chapters as well. And yet most of the churches today completely ignore these prophecies. Why do they ignore Revelation 17? Why do they ignore Daniel 2, where God inspired his prophet to give us an incredible one-chapter overview of Bible prophecy? God revealed through Daniel a vision of a great image. You've heard us talk about this before. That image that represented 4 successive world-ruling kingdoms that would lead right up to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, this isn't too complicated for you to understand. You just need a basic understanding of secular history and then enough humility and faith to just believe God, to believe what God prophesies in the Bible, and to see how it squares perfectly with secular history. Now, in Daniel 7, as we discussed on another program recently, the prophet describes 4 beasts, again, representing 4 Gentile kingdoms. But in that chapter, Daniel places a special emphasis on the 4th empire, the Roman Empire. This beast has 10 horns, which the prophet says are 10 kings that shall arise out of or after the Roman Empire. That's in Daniel 7 and verse 24. Now, Daniel in that same chapter also describes a little horn that grew among the 10 horns and uprooted the first 3. That's in Daniel 7 and verse 8. And the meaning of that prophecy is made plain here in the book of Revelation, that little horn being symbolic of a great church. Now, in Revelation, firstly in chapter 13, you're going to have to get some of our literature and study these other chapters on your own. We just don't have the time to go through all of them. But in Revelation 13, the Apostle John discusses just one beast which represented the 4th and final kingdom, the Roman Empire. Now, John lived during the days of the Roman Empire. He didn't write about the previous 3 empires like Daniel did, because those were already fulfilled prophecy. They were history. So God inspired John to focus on the 4th and the final Gentile system. Now, why do the churches, as I say, why do the churches ignore these many prophetic chapters? All of them written and recorded specifically for our time today. In Revelation 13, John describes a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns, one head of which received a deadly wound. That's in verse 3. You can see that on your own. Now, the Roman Empire, if you know a bit about secular history, it existed from 31 BC to AD 476, at which point the kingdom was crushed. It died, but its deadly wound was healed, just as John prophesied in Revelation 13. That healing took place when Justinian recognized the supremacy of the Pope in 554 AD, and then the Roman Empire sprung to life. Now, here in Revelation 17, God fills in the remaining details. In this chapter, John describes a beast with 7 heads. He describes a woman, which symbolizes a great church, as riding that beast. Notice Revelation 17 here and verse 1. It says, "And there came one of the 7 angels, which had the 7 vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come here, it says, and I will show unto you the judgment of the great whore that sits upon many waters." So this woman is called a great whore here in verse 1. And so she symbolizes a great false church, obviously. Obviously, this isn't the true church. It's really an unholy union between this woman and the nations emerging out of this European bloc. An unholy union. It got the name Holy Roman Empire down through history, but it's not holy. It's an unholy alliance. Verse 5 continues and says, "And upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth." So this is, it comes from that old Babylonian mystery of religion, the same religion of ancient Babylon. It's here even to this day. Here again, this is in John's book of Revelation. It's prophecy for today. That same system that started in ancient Babylon, that same religious system, it is alive and well today. Now, down through history again, if you look through the Middle Ages and all of those resurrections of that Roman Empire, you can see this alliance between this church and state. You can see where this one great church has either heavily influenced or just dominated the emergence of the Roman Empire or the resurrection of the Roman Empire. Now here in verse 5 it also speaks of her as being the mother of harlots, or in other words having all kinds of daughters as well. And if you know anything about that history, there have been a number of churches or denominations to break away from that mother church. And they're all divided and in confusion in some ways, which is what Babylon means. It means confusion. And yet at the same time, if you look at the core doctrines of the mother church or all of the protesting daughters, they're very much the same. They're in disagreement on some of the details. They don't agree on the government, obviously, or there wouldn't be hundreds and hundreds of Christian denominations. But the core doctrines, they're pretty much the same. The beliefs, the holidays that are kept, all of those things. Babylon, as we know, just means confusion. And that's what you see in Christianity today. No matter the movement that's there to try to unite those churches together, no matter the Protestant preachers that you might hear talking about how all Christians need to get together, no matter what denomination you go to, they say, but we all need to sort of join hands in this effort. And yet if you look at all these groups, you see nothing but division. That's because it stems from that Babylonian mystery religion. Verse 7 says, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." In other words, the Bible interprets itself. John says, why are you marveling? I'll tell you, I'll give you the meaning, I'll explain what this is all about. Notice what my father wrote in Daniel Unlocks Revelation. He said there are parts of Revelation that people in general could understand. They could understand better if they would put the pieces together and face basic facts. See, that's the key. You've got to face basic facts of history and then put these pieces together as the Bible does for us. He continues, "Here is depicted a woman riding a beast, meaning a church will be guiding a political entity. If people would face basic facts like these, they would understand the book of Revelation better. They would. In fact, you could go back 150 years or so and see in some of the older commentaries where there was an understanding of this, of what the beast represented, of who the great false church was. Why? Why do you have to go back to 1850 and see just a general awareness of what some of these passages meant? And yet today you pick up a new commentary, you pick up some kind of new Bible help, and there's nothing in there about what this actually means. Confusion. See, this world has just drifted so far from God, and really, frankly, the preachers have become so weak and timid, they're afraid to give you the truth on what these prophecies really mean. They're afraid to tell you what's coming in Europe or what's coming out of Rome. They're afraid to tell you this. But John wasn't. God gave him these visions, and John wrote them down. And the meaning is for us today. The application is for us today. The beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is. Now, Mr. Armstrong was on the scene for the 6th resurrection of the beast, as you heard in that radio clip. He was there. He saw it. He was writing about it when it was happening. And then even when that empire ended at the end of World War II, he was there telling us about the next one, the final one, the 7th one, the 7th and final resurrection of that Roman Empire. And here we are, here you are, witnessing it. You're seeing it happen. We're part of a work that's watching these events play out. Not just in the Trumpet magazine that we send to our followers, our readers, every month. But as I said, it's reported now in Reuters. You see it in the British newspapers. It's talked about some over here, not as much as it should be. Look, you need to get the literature that we have on this. This one in particular, he was right. A thick booklet we have on the subject of all these signature prophecies that Mr. Armstrong proclaimed for decades. 50 to 60 pages in this beautifully illustrated book. call the number on your screen and request this today, along with the other one that we're going to offer at the end of the program. Who or what is the prophetic beast? This was actually written by Herbert W. Armstrong. This was a booklet we actually won in a lawsuit. We obtained the rights to this booklet so that we could give it to you freely. Call the number on your screen and get both of these booklets today. He was right, and who or what is the prophetic beast? Why, as I said, why aren't there more religions out there, more churches, more preachers talking to you about what's in Revelation 17, a critical, pivotal prophecy that just lays it all out there for us? I mean, it's history in advance. Who wouldn't want to know this? Who wouldn't want to know what's happening or what will happen in the future? Now so much of it is happening. It's happening right before our eyes. John even said, look, you can know, or the angel who inspired this said to him, why are you marveling? You can know this. You can understand this. Look, here's the explanation. What you saw there's these mountains and valleys and so on, the 7 heads and the 10 horns. Verse 8, just to repeat again, it talks about these peaks, these mountains and valleys. And again, you have in the history there of the Roman Empire, those 7 resurrections. They were to happen successively, as I say, but after each rising peak, there was a time when it then slipped into the valley before the next resurrection happened. And that's been the history. Here again, you just have to know a little bit of the basics from secular history. Notice what H.G. Wells wrote in the Outline of History. This was his work from back in the early 1900s. He's talking about the Roman Empire. This is what a secular historian had to say. The Roman Empire staggers, sprawls, is thrust off the stage, and then reappears. And if we may carry the image one step further, it is the Church of Rome which plays the part of the magician and keeps this corpse alive. You see the union of church and state. You see the church at Rome breathing life into that corpse, bringing it back to life. And that's what we're seeing again today. The 7th and final resurrection, just as the Bible prophesied. How about that? How exciting is that? To know this history in advance, as Mr. Armstrong knew back in the 50s, back in the 40s even, and was talking about there in the 1960s. In that radio clip that you heard, verse 10 here, it says, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. You see, the other is not yet come. I mean, this really dates when this prophecy would be made known to a mass audience. Mr. Armstrong was on the scene when the one that was there, the 6th one, is, but there's another one that would yet come, and God opened his mind to understand that there was one coming in the future. Mr. Armstrong died in 1986. The wall in Berlin came down in 1989, and look at what we've seen happen in these last 2 decades. Exactly what he prophesied. Exactly what he prophesied. And all of it based right here on Revelation 17 and Revelation 13 and Daniel 7 and Daniel 2. Pivotal prophecies. Verse 12, it says, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. This is not talking about the 10 successive kingdoms to emerge. This is now talking about 10 contemporaneous kings, the 10 nations that rise together out of a United States of Europe. 10 nations. Now, I read in a program recently, this blog over in Britain, Archbishop Cranmer, which is a pseudonym for this conservative author over there, and he talked about the spirit of Charlemagne and how it's arisen in Europe. That same spirit, he said, the European Union is essentially the recreation of the old empire of Charlemagne. From the moment the Treaty of Paris was signed in 1951, the European coal and steel community bound together the economic and political destinies of France and Germany. That's what this blog says, bringing some historical perspective into these developments. Now, what he talks about there, you could have easily read in the Plain Truth 50 years ago, this pink sheet that I told you about at the top of the program that was sent along with the correspondence courses from the 1950s and 60s. This pink sheet It says in this handout, by now it should be evident to all that Germany is out to conquer the world. By now it should be evident to all, Mr. Armstrong wrote in the 1950s and 60s. Mr. Armstrong proclaimed in the 1950s and 60s. It should be evident to all, it said in that pink handout. It wasn't at the time. I mean, people who refused to believe it then had better wake up and look at what's happening in this world and see what's happening. Going back to that website, Archbishop Cranmer from November 10th, he said, never forget the EU's answer to the EU's problems is invariably more Europe. Every crisis is an opportunity for more regulation and centralization. He says, and the sovereign debt crisis that threatens to engulf European financial markets is no exception. The eurozone will be stabilized economically in accordance with the Bundesbank discipline and bound politically by Teutonic political militarism. He says, finally, the German Constitutional Court would have it no other way. The outcome, he writes, will be 10 nations intent upon political union. I mean, that's a remarkable statement. That's from Archbishop Cranmer from November 10th of this year. But you have to know, that's also from Mr. Herbert W. Armstrong from the 1940s, from the 1950s, 50, 60 years ago. All of that, as I say, is brought out in this powerful booklet. He was right. He was. World events are proving him so every day. Won't you please wake up to what's happening in your world? Don't think that this is in some distance, far off distance in Europe and it's never going to impact us. It will impact the United States. That is explained in another book. Well, it's in this too. I was going to bring up the United States and Britain in prophecy. But we explain in this booklet as well how it will impact the United States. Don't drift off into a slumber or a sleep. Wake up and see what's happening. Watch, Jesus said. Watch world events, because you don't know what hour they're going to come crashing down. You don't know when time will be up. And so he says to do what? Go to sleep? To put your Bible on the shelf? To not even get into the Bible? Of course not. Jesus said, awaken and see what's happening. Wake up and look at what's happening, and then get into your Bible. I mean, this handout, this letter, as I said, it came along with this Bible correspondence course. This course, I'm going through this older one myself, just for my own personal study. But as you know, if you've followed our program for very long, we have the updated and revised version of this same course. There's a a few little details that need to be updated as far as the world events discussed in these handouts. But we've updated those for you. The scriptures, the prophecies that are expounded upon in this older course, you can get them right now. You can get them today with our Armstrong College Bible Correspondence course, as well as this booklet, and then also, as I said earlier, Who and What is the Prophetic Beast? One of Mr. Armstrong's most popular booklets ever. Call the number on your screen and get all that we've offered to you and begin your study today. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you again next time.